This is a very exciting moment for Alberta. It's a moment that may not come again. And so I hope that they will seize the day and do what they can to save themselves, and in doing so, potentially saving the country.
If Alberta left Canada, would that also be in Canada's best interest? This is Sydney Fizzard for Rebel News, coming to you from Calgary, Alberta, for my interview with Queen's University Professor of Law and Executive Director at Right Probe, who's also written the Alberta Declaration of Independence on his Substack. Bruce Pardy chimed in on this very tense legal matter. The question of whether or not Alberta will separate from Canada, there's not only the matter of how legally viable it is, there's the matter of the after effects, the next government that Alberta will decide to form, and the next government that Canada might decide to take on if such a ground-shattering event as a province leaving would be actually ends up happening. So we spoke to him at the Calgary UCP's Courage to Listen town hall event to find out his perspective on the situation.
Alberta needs to leave the country. Canada is essentially unfixable, I think, at this point, and Alberta deserves to save itself, but in so doing, I think Alberta is the best chance for Canada to be able to save itself. And by that I mean this: Canada's problems are so deeply entrenched that only a political earthquake is really going to make it face up to its problems. And so what Alberta could do if they decided to resolve to leave and pass the referendum, it could cause a cascade, a domino effect, and other provinces and people around the country might start to think that Canada isn't viable. Now, I don't think Canada is all that viable right now anyway, but Alberta's departure would certainly bring that into focus.
You recently wrote, I saw on your Substack there, the Alberta Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
So just tell us, what is the core of that message, the thing that you hope punches through the best?
Let's put it this way. Countries, especially newer countries like Canada and the U.S., have founding myths or stories. And the founding story of America is liberty. They had a revolution to get out from underneath the thumb of the king. At the time, the Americans invited the Canadians, as they then were, to join them, and the Canadians said no. So the Canadians were the loyalists and the Americans were the revolutionaries. But essentially what that means is that the Canadians wanted to be under the thumb of the king. And so, if you like, the founding story of Canada is deference to authority. And that attitude and that character persists today far more than it does in the States, and in spite of their more recent troubles. Americans still, I think, strongly believe in that idea that they are built upon the idea of liberty. The phrase in our Constitution is peace, order, and good government, which is really it's really an instruction to behave and do what you're told.
I want to throw a bit of a curveball your way, where obviously, there's the separatist sentiment in the air. What about simply a merger between Alberta and Saskatchewan? Well,
listen, if Alberta resolved to leave, then maybe Saskatchewan would decide to join. And if those two provinces merge, that would be terrific. I mean, in fact, if I recall correctly, there was originally a proposal to have them together. I mean, they weren't two separate things at that time. I think it was going to be called Buffalo. If the two of them wanted to get together and create a new independent country called Buffalo, I'd be all for that.
There's talk about the Clarity Act. There's talk about the different legal roads to success here. But this is also very uncharted territory. There's word today that Prime Minister Mark Carney is already looking into separatist Crown lawyers who are fighting in the court to show that Quebec didn't have a right either. How do you think that those in Ottawa, those in Ontario, those in the East are going to approach this situation in the months ahead?
Well, I think people should be aware, number one, that there is a very slight path laid out by the Supreme Court in their 1998 decision about Quebec, which basically says that if a province passes a referendum, with a clear question and a clear majority of people support it, then that province has the mandate to negotiate its departure. And the rest of the country has a mandate to negotiate as well, and neither side has a unilateral right. However, at the same time, I think it's realistic to view all of this as not a simple case of simply following a few steps and then away you go. This is going to be a political revolution if it happens. And really, the viability of Confederation is in question. Alberta is the biggest payer into Confederation in equalization payment terms. And its departure could put the whole project into doubt. And so we should expect the powers that be, especially in Ottawa, to resist that idea with all their might. And yes, so there's going to be all kinds of measures and even political hijinks to try and prevent that ultimately from occurring. So people should go into this with open eyes. This is going to be a political revolution, and that means you're heading into unknown territory.
Speaking of the known territory, the parliamentary system that we've come to know and let's say love, what hope is there that that system itself can be adjusted to better fit Alberta's needs?
I have been recommending and of course this is all based upon a big if, but if in fact Alberta got to the point of separating and becoming independent, my hope would be that they would create a new kind of governing system, that they wouldn't try to adapt the Westminster system, that they would say, look, the system that the Americans have is architecturally superior. Let's start with that. Let's start with the bare bones of the American system and then try to improve it. But the American system has some flaws. Let's try and sit down and figure out what they are. Let's fix them and we'll move on. We'll leave behind the Canadian system that doesn't seem to work very well.
And if you could just pinpoint the parliamentary system, the issues that people would speak of, what are these key matters of issue at hand?
Right. Well, there are several, but let's just use one example. In the American Constitution, they have a more explicit and distinct separation of powers. So the legislature and executive and courts. Now we have separate powers as well. We have an executive, legislature, and courts, but in our system, the same group of people control the legislative branch and the executive. So the Prime Minister and the Cabinet are the main players in the House of Commons, and they also are the ministers in charge of all the ministries. So if they need a mandate from Parliament, they can just wander into Parliament and have the bill passed, and away they go. In the United States, they have a separate executive branch headed by the President and his Cabinet, and then a separate Congress composed of two chambers, the Senate and House of Representatives. And those two branches essentially function independently. Now, they're dependent upon each other in the sense that the executive requires legislative mandates, but the president doesn't sit in Congress. He has a veto. But the business of legislating is distinct from the business of executing the laws and policies of the country. And that is a more distinct, express separation. I think it serves them well, and we would be well advised to adopt it.
And last word to you.
Oh, well, this is a very exciting moment for Alberta. It's a moment that may not come again. And so I hope that they will seize the day and do what they can to save themselves, and in doing so, potentially saving the country.
Let us know in the comments, what do you think Alberta should do if it becomes its own nation? Should it become a parliamentary system? Should it adopt something like the Americans have? Let us know in the comments. For Rebel News, I'm Sydney Fizzard. DoneGettingScrewed.com is where you have to go if you want to see our latest coverage of the Western independence movement sweeping across Canada.